ahead and get started for the last session of the day. It's good to see we've got a pretty good group for running 5 tracks today, I guess. I kind of want to get a feel for what types of roles people play with their Drupal websites and they're just learning Drupal. So how many people here have done search engine optimization in the past? That's something they actually do. Okay, about maybe a third of the room. How many people just author content on their website? Okay. How many people are just getting started with Drupal, trying to learn more what it's about? Okay, just a few. Site builders, themers, developers. Okay, great. Wow, we got a lot of you guys. Okay, okay, great. So we're going to start off thinking about why do brick and mortar companies, why do they do sampling? What problems are they trying to solve with sampling? Introducing a customer to a product. Why is sampling an effective way of doing that versus, say, just advertising? Buying radio ads or TV ads or something.
People can put their hands on it or taste it.
Exactly. You get a much more tangible feel for what the product is. Are there other reasons that we like sampling? Why sampling is effective? Free? We love free? What is free? If I give you something for free, what effect might that have? Reciprocity. Exactly. So reciprocity is another, I've got guilted into, buying some things that I got samples for. And so, one thing that's very difficult to do is that everyone, I love these catchphrases that you hear out there. There's all these catchphrases that companies have about their products and so forth. It's very hard to get people to actually try these things. It's very hard to differentiate just based on some slogan. And so it's a way of giving people the actual tangible what something's going to be like. So are there any ways that we can do, I shouldn't have gone to this slide yet because it'll give you a hint. Are there ways using the web that we can give people samples of who we are as an organization, maybe even as a freelancer, as a company? What ways could we give people samples? Jim?
Give them an offer. 10 top tips, or like I said, PDF or video.
An offer, video. Exactly, content. Content, we can give people a sample of what it's like, say if you're in the professional services realm, what it's like to work with us, the things that we know through content. You can, if you do a product, you can do other things such as trials, but you can also do demos. There's lots of things that we do to give people samples of content. So one of the phrases, of course, that's been around for quite a while about the web, and I'm sure existed well before the web, was content is king. But I've always thought content's really not king. There's a lot of content out there that's just garbage. The web's full of garbage content. Great content is king. And so what we're going to be looking at today is how do we do that? So one thing that I like to talk about is that there's a lot of websites out there that are just brochures. They're online brochures. And really what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to generate goodwill. And so the first step in doing that is we need to create content. And that might sound kind of obvious, but there's a ton of people that all they have is a brochureware website. And so they need to create other types of content, even if it is just brochureware, they need to keep it updated. There's a lot of people that build their website, it's got 8 pages on it, and it stays that way for 5 years. We also need to build content that connects. There's a lot of corporate communications departments that builds content that strokes the egos of the C-level executives. Doesn't necessarily connect with their audience. And while that might have worked in the old days of brand building back in the 20th century, it doesn't work particularly now in the day of social. Then we need to market our content. 2 of my favorite ways of marketing is through social media or human referrals and through search traffic. So we talked about a little bit that most websites are just a brochure. But really what we need to do is we need to add to those websites goodwill sections. Goodwill sections, one of the most common ways of doing that is a blog. Could be a video area, could be a podcast, a wiki, forums, white papers, webinars. There's tons of different ways of creating goodwill content that's not just necessarily a focused, polished corporate message. It's things that are meant to connect with our audience, not just promote the organization. And of course, we want to tie these together so they can help cross-promote. So for example, like on the Level 10 blog, one of the things that we do a fair amount of is training. And so when you read blog posts, we have our upcoming training courses over to the side. So while it's primarily a goodwill piece, and a lot of people are coming there for information, it's also promoting certain things that are more on our brochure side. So a lot of people are used to, how do we write for humans? That's what most of us spend our time doing. But there's a very small set of experts out there that have learned how to write for robots, or how to write for the search engines. The interesting thing that I found in all these years of doing this is there's very few people that understand how to write for both at the same time. And that's where the real magic is. It used to be, and part of this has to do with that, say 10 years ago, all you had to do is write for the search engines, and you could get all kinds of traffic, and you get paid to be an SEO expert. Now, this content didn't actually do anything to build brands. It didn't convert customers. People basically went there and a lot of times actually got a bad brand impression because all these people were paid to do was to build traffic from the search engines, not to write for humans. But over time, the search engines have gotten much better at understanding what humans want. And so writing for both of these groups have converged over the years, and the search engines spend a lot of time trying to figure out how do we get these two things to converge so that what the robots find interesting, humans will find interesting also. And of course, the reason we're doing this is a lot of times if you write a piece of content and you promote it, say through social, if it's a good piece of content, you get a nice social bump. But ultimately, a lot of my friends that are only in social media, that's all they do. They look to promote it out to their tribe, and they tweet, and they put on Facebook and LinkedIn, and they just get this bump, and then pretty much no one reads it after a few days. But if they also do search engine optimization, well, then they might get a little bit of bump here, but then long term, they might get a nice bit of traffic that continues out for years. And of course, the reverse is true. There's a lot of people that only do search engine optimization. They don't do the social stuff, and a lot of times they don't get this big bump in the beginning that creates energy. And actually, the search engines are starting to look at what type of energy are we seeing? What sort of street cred does a piece of content have? And we're using social indicators to do that. So we need to leverage both these techniques together. So I'm going to spend most of the time today talking to the people who know how to write for humans, learning more about how to work with the search engines. There's plenty of great books if you're if you are a person who tends to write just for the search engines. There's plenty of great books and plenty of great articles about how to write more for humans. And most people in this room, we're going to be more on the human side. So that's what we're going to spend our time looking at today. So has anybody taken a class in journalism? I know you probably have, but so what is one of the first things when we want to write an article? What is one of the first things that we want to do before we start our article? Pardon? Get to the point. Get some information. When we're developing websites, what's one of the first things we want to understand? Who the audience is. Exactly. Who are we writing for? And so what I'd like to explain is, a lot of times when you're writing, you think of all these different people you want to be writing for, and really, search optimizing content is just about adding in one other audience, the search engines. So what we're going to be looking at is, I'm going to do a little bit of just what SEO is, just covering some of the basics. It seems to be kind of needed for a talk like this. We're going to run real quickly through the modules. I'm not going to worry too much about the modules because there's going to be some shortcuts that we're going to use. You don't have to know them all. Then we're going to get into some advanced content workflows and some advanced secrets. So for those who, whenever I say search engine optimization, search engine marketing, how many people maybe don't know what that is? Kind of, I'll walk through real quick what it is. So search engine optimization, really there's a larger term called search engine marketing, which is sort of, the search engines offer a lot of different tools, and search engine marketing is where we bring all of those together. And it's really all about this box. This box and boxes just like it over on Bing and Yahoo and up in your browsers and Firefox and Chrome and things like that. Because millions of times a day, people go to this box and ones like it, and they type in things they're looking for. And people, of course, want to place as well as they can. The secret is when a result comes back, they want to be on these pages. What a lot of people don't realize, although I say a lot more people do nowadays, say through a few years back, a lot of people didn't realize that there's a paid side and there's an organic side. Actually, the search engines have gotten even more complex. There's more sides than that. But these are the two primary ones that are important to look at. So organic are the ones that are essentially free. When someone clicks on something that's over here, you get free traffic to your website. The paid side is basically where you say to a search engine, I'm going to pay you for all the traffic you send me, and every time someone clicks through, you might pay a certain amount. It might be as low as, say, a dime, Typically, it might be somewhere in the $1 to a few dollars. There are some extremely competitive terms that are even up to $100. Certain ones for high-end professional services, certain legal type things. So what we're trying to do is figure out how do we place well in this area. To do that, the one thing we need to look at is the psychology of the search engine. So when we write content, what are we hoping to do? When we write a blog piece, what are we hoping to gain from that? Readers, an audience, exactly. Influence. Well, ultimately, that's the exact same thing that search engines want also, is that they want to be the ultimate referrer. They want to be the person that everyone comes to get great information. And the way we get to the top from a strategic level, is that we want to be that great referrer. Now, the truth is there's actually been all kinds of ways of fooling the search engines over all these years. The ways of doing it are becoming fewer and farther between. They're harder to do, but they still exist. But ultimately, if we stay in line with that, we want to provide great content. We don't want to fool and find loopholes in the search engines, a process that are called black hat SEO. We want to stay on the white hat side, and we want to always provide value. That's what we want to do. So from a more technical standpoint, how do we go about doing this? It actually is fairly complicated. There's a few different 100 factors that the search engines are looking for, but in general, it breaks down to 3 major categories, the ABCs of search engine optimization. Great architecture times great backlinks times great content equals great rankings. So let's take a look at how this works. The good news is that Drupal out of the box and with some contributing modules actually gives us some pretty good architecture. Now, there are a lot of things that you want to add in to really tweak this architecture well. And so, we've seen with Drupal, you can have lots of checkboxes. You've got this whole control panel. We don't have to worry about, I'm going to run through these modules very quickly. Most of these are in 6. Unfortunately, not all of these have been ported to 7. Some are in 7. I'm going to move through them very quickly because at the end, there's really an easy button for how we're going to work, for what modules we're going to need. But I am going to touch on the classes of modules. These are the really important ones. And unfortunately, a couple of these have not, most of these have made it over except for NodeWords, although there is something called NodeWords, quick NodeWords, that's available in 7. Actually, we found a bug in page title in 6 and in 5.2. But these are some of the really important ones. These are some nice optional ones. And again, don't worry. I wouldn't worry about writing these down. I actually have this posted, but I'll post the updated version on SlideShare, and there will be an easy button at the end. One of the other things that we need to look at is caching. It's amazing the impact of how fast a page loads. Not only will it cause people to leave your site because they don't want to wait, the search engines look more and more about, well, they don't want to send people to sites that are spending little money on hosting, running into performance issues and so forth. So there's some basic modules to help with that. Backlinks is something that really, so those are some architectural modules that you can use in Drupal to help build a search-friendly architecture. As far as backlinks are something that's actually not something your CMS by itself can do. You do that ideally by writing great content. There are other ways of doing it. The highest quality is going to come from writing great content that people want to link to. There are some ways, though, that Drupal can help you facilitate getting those links. One is doing some social sharing buttons. We'll actually take a look at this a little bit later on. Things like the tweet button, which will allow you to tweet out when people see your content. Things where you can easily act to dig. Trackback and pingbacks are basically a way for bloggers to interconnect their content. So it's sort of a way of saying that actually these are things that are built into WordPress, but in Drupal they're contributed modules, and sort of ways of saying that we didn't just write a blog, we actually wrote a blog because we want to connect with other people and have threaded discussions across websites. So next we have content, the C in our ABCs. And again, that's up to you on how to create content. The tricky thing is, and here's just a few helper modules that will help with content. Link checker just helps make sure you don't have 404 errors. Scheduler, if you write blogs, a lot of times you want to schedule them for times when people will be reading. I write a lot of my blogs in the middle of the night, and so I want to schedule them for the day, for sometime back in the middle of the morning. Activity streams pulls content from other areas. There's other ways of doing that, such as feeds and the Feeds API. And obviously, you don't want your content to be full of spam. This is primarily for content. You're probably familiar with all that. There's a wealth of anti-spam modules. And you also want to be measuring what kind of traffic you're getting. It kind of amazes me, the people that spend a lot of money on websites and traffic, and they don't really spend a ton of time actually measuring and knowing what kind of traffic they're getting. And Google Analytics is super simple to use. If you're not using it on your website, I highly recommend grab the module and install it. And so I mentioned that there is a easy button for doing all of this. And that easy button's been around for several years, and it's called the SEO Checklist. And so this, basically, why you didn't have to write down all those modules is because for the most part, most of those are actually in this checklist. The few that aren't, they're available on the slideshow presentation. And it'll kind of point you to some of the correct modules. Now let's move, though, to, so I talked about that optimizing content is important. One thing that the SEO checklist primarily deals with is how do we architect our site really well? How do we get some of this facilitation, but not necessarily how do we optimize content? So it's sort of like it gives us the ability that we have all this potential, but yet we don't exactly know how to unleash it. And so what we wanted to do a few years back is help people write better content, help them optimize. And a lot of what Level 10 does is we help companies blog. We help companies become more transparent to their end users. We don't really do SEO in the traditional sense that we go in and we optimize pages and do things like that, but we train people how to build great content and how to get the most out of it, and we want them to get some search traffic. So we built a series of tools so they didn't need experts, that they could do a lot of this on their own. So it starts with a content workflow. Most websites are built, and the need for content comes from three places. One, the organization. The organization has products. They might want to write about their history. They might want to have a contact form. So there's going to be various different pages on a website that the organization wants to have. In your goodwill areas, a lot of times it's going to have authors. If you have people blogging, someone's just got something they want to write about, or wikis or something like that. And the third is users. One of the best places to get ideas for writing content on your website is just what kind of forms are getting submitted. We all the time have college students hitting us, or people that are some sort of student asking us questions about the best way to do this and do that. And so we take a lot of those and turn them into blog posts, sometimes or white papers or podcasts or something like that. But basically you take those three needs and you come up with a list of topics that you need to author. And of course, a typical process is you go and you write that content. Most websites just stop at this point. But really, if you want the search engines to take notice of this, the next thing you need to do is look at, okay, well, we just wrote this piece of content. What are the keywords that we should target this around? We'll take a look at how the keyword targeting works. And then we want to optimize the content around those keywords. But really what the process of SEO is about, and this is one part of it, is starting with a keyword-driven process. And so there's three primary drivers as to where we're finding keywords. One is relevance. Which ones are important to us? If you are a company that sells bikes, there's not much point in putting articles about Britney Spears, despite the fact that you'll generate lots of traffic. Actually, I should probably stop using it. I've been using that example for probably like 5 years now. I guess I probably should change. Katy Perry, I guess, would be, I'll switch the example. Of course, you want to know which ones are popular, which ones are actually driving traffic, and you want to look at competition. One thing that's very interesting is a lot of times, I remember one of the first SEO clients we had many, many years ago, they sold wrought iron mailboxes, and they wanted to be number one for the term mailboxes. It's like, well, first of all, there's an insane amount of competition. That's not happening. And second of all, it's not super relevant because it's people looking for all kinds of other things other than wrought iron mailboxes. But the main thing is we say, well, we probably can't get a win on that, but if we look for things that are more targeted, such as brass mailboxes, or wrought iron, and we start looking at these longer, less competitive terms, yes, they have a lot less popularity, but they also have a lot less competition, and a lot of times they tend to be a lot more relevant. So they end up being more valuable. So from these three drivers, you can come up with a list of keywords, and then you run through the same thing. We need to author content around those keywords. We want to tweak our keywords, look for what's called long tailing. So, for example, instead of writing an article about mailboxes, we might want to look at, well, is it wrought iron mailboxes, or is it steel mailboxes, or is it ornamental, or is it antique? So what are some of the modifier words that people are tending to use around our keyword list? And then we need to optimize the content around it. And then we need to go and promote this content. Ideally, you've written good content that humans will find interesting, because then it can go around the social channels. If it's just going to be kind of dull content that we put out there just to get the search engines to come, we're not going to get a whole lot of social interaction. So how does keyword research work? This is a process that many SEO companies have been doing for many years. And generally it works with, they talk to a client, and they brainstorm some keyword phrases about what they think their website's about, what people might be searching for, and they come up with a seed keyword list. Then you go to these tools that allow you to basically look up synonyms. They basically allow you to look at popularity and competition, and there's a bunch of them that are out there. Some are kind of expensive. There's actually a decent free one from Google. There's a few other free ones, but there's different levels of quality. And the keyword researcher comes back with a long, long list of keywords. They hand it back to the owner of the website to evaluate relevancy. So a lot of times you just don't know the business well enough to know how relevant is it to what they do. And then they evaluate, and you come back with a targeted keyword list that you start writing content about. And you have this whole crazy process of using spreadsheets and emails and going into third-party tools and going back and forth. Anyone have an idea of what happens in this process? It works well for about a month. And then people stop updating the spreadsheets. People no longer have access to the information. So if you've got people that are blogging, they don't necessarily have access to the information that's in those spreadsheets. So what we wanted to do is we thought, well, why don't we just bring this whole process into Drupal and just integrate everything we need to into our website, so that way the people who are the experts at SEO and the experts at doing keyword research can share that information with the people who are actually the subject matter experts in doing the writing. And so this is a little look of how this module works. So basically, let's say, for example, we're trying to optimize a site around biking, and we start with some seed keywords like bike, bicycles, cycles. We import those in, and then we've got these little tips that allow us to go and get more information. So for example, we say, well, I want to go do some research, and it comes back and it tells us, well, here's the popularity of this word. Here's some competition. It's pulling this data from 3 different sources. And then it looks at, well, what are some other modifier words? Maybe some different variants that would go with this. And then we've got links to some other tools that can do things like, what kind of trends are we seeing? So for example, there's the word bicycle. So we get an idea of how competitive a word is, what kind of trends we're seeing, and so forth. And basically using this data, and normally this would be someone who's maybe somewhat more experienced, although we've clients that we've trained in just a matter of an hour or two to use these tools, to get some good value out of these tools. Then we can go through and start saying, well, some of these keywords that we evaluate, we say, well, these are going to be important, and we want to target them. So we can go through and say, well, is this a high priority, a standard priority, low? And this is going to signal then to our content writers the types of things that we want them to write about. And there's all kinds of features. So for example, if we want, under say Trek bicycle, we could dig down deeper and get down to more specific numbers. I'm going to go ahead and skip the rest of this piece because we're going to swing back to it in a second. Once we've come up with a list of keywords that we want to optimize around, then we want to start writing content. And this content could be from 2 different angles. One, it could be that someone starts with our keyword list and starts writing content, or it could be they just want to write content. Maybe if someone just went out on a great mountain bike, or just went and rode a new, say, Trek mountain bike, and they just want to write about it. So they go ahead and write the content. And either way, then we want to extract out what sort of keywords are we focused on around here. Now, if you started with a keyword, hopefully your writers knew how to focus around it from the beginning. But if it's something that you just wrote about because someone thought it was interesting or is just a topic they wanted to write about, a lot of times we want to extract out what keywords are actually being focused on in this content. From there, we want to go do some search engine research or keyword research to find out ways, Yes. In fact, there's 2. There's one that works that's very quick, that uses like an open source code base, and then there's a system called Alchemy that's extremely good. In the old days, we used to use OpenCalais, and OpenCalais is great, but the problem with it is it's very tuned towards news topics. And so the more advanced version, and these are all free tools. And what you do have to do, the only one drawback to Alchemy is you have to get their API. But their API, they give you something like 10,000 hits a month for like free. So it's like you'll never go through, all those extractions. So it is a system. It comes back in ways that it does entities. Like it'll pull out and say, oh, this is a city. This is a person you're talking about. And so that's the name of that model. Yeah.
Have you ever used OpenAmplify?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've used that.
That's another one. There actually is a module for
Oh, okay. We tried a few different ones, and Alchemy was the one that we kind of found was the best. But no, I haven't tried OpenAmplify. I've heard of it. So anyway, we want to go ahead and do the research and maybe look for modifier words. Maybe we want to look for synonyms. We want to change out the words altogether to something that's more popular. And ideally, we want to come up with maybe one keyword with a couple modifier words. So for example, if we're doing something like, say, a Trek mountain bike, maybe we want to use a model name. That's popular that we used, or maybe some sort of component on it. So we take a look at a little bit about how this works. So we've gone through and we've created our site keywords, and now we can go through and we've flagged all of them so that our knowledge workers can go and write content. So if someone comes and says, oh, I see mountain bike frames is a keyword we want to write content around. Wow, Drupal 6 is looking old at this point. Just pasting in some content here. And over time, when this is done in a larger site, there's tons of keywords that have been evaluated in here. And so then one of the things we wanted to do is that you can start typing in keywords and see what the evaluations are. So we typed in a couple phrases and we see that, oh, sure enough, that the mountain bike frames is considered a top keyword by the person who's managing the keywords that we need to go after. So we ran an analysis. There's a quick extraction tool that's going through and just pulling out which keywords are being used based on frequency and prominence and so forth. And then we can use the keyword research tool to go dig in and find out which phrases are popular, to find out what modifier terms we have. So for example, we might find out that cross-country is not a particularly popular term. Using the term XC is more common and has got some more popularity. These aren't huge numbers. But they work for the example. And then we can go through and flag which terms we want to go after for this piece of content. So once we've done that, we figured out which keywords we want to do. Now we need to optimize the content for those keywords. When we used to do training around how to do SEO with Drupal, we used to give people a slide like this. Your page title, you want to be 40 to 70 characters. You want to use your keyword phrase at least one time, hopefully towards the front of the phrase. Your body follows these rules. Your meta description follows these rules. Keywords follow these rules. And we spent a lot of time copying and pasting. There's really no way to actually do this prominence score in, like, say, a typical word processor. And it was a lot of back and forth. So what happens in a real website if you send the client home with that process? They don't do it. Yeah, exactly. They do it a couple times, go, oh, this is cool, and then they forget about it. So again, we thought, well, why don't we just bring this process into Drupal? So we created a module called the Content Optimizer. So for example, if we're targeting the keyword mountain bike frames, we also have another module, readability, which just kind of looks at the grade level using some automated tools. It's going to come back with some recommendations of things that we'd want to do in order to optimize better for those terms. And then that information is also embedded here so that we can go ahead and change, say for example, we want to change our title. And we just quickly look at the effect that it's having. And I should say, these are not necessarily hard and fast rules. They're good guidelines, but also just having the numbers help. So part of it's just showing the numbers of prominence, keywords, placement, and things along those lines. Part of it's actually there's some recommendations that are good for beginners. Once you get a little bit more advanced, though, a lot of times you tend to bend those rules. Mainly because search engines don't want to see that everything's optimized perfectly. So you want to kind of detune sometimes some of these suggestions. But it gives it kind of a good guidelines, a good starting default. And it's just going to go through and optimize, putting in the phrase a few more times, and should optimize. And then with like a readability, that's kind of nice to use sometimes. A lot of people, a lot of sites should really probably be writing for like the 9th grade to 10th grade level. And I know I tend to write things, and those are just automated systems that count syllables and sentences and words like that, just kind of little extra hints. Some advanced secrets. One thing that happens is, search engine optimization has been around for so long, and there's so much content that's been optimized on the web that a lot of times it's hard to get to that next level. So you run through all of those things, and you might be, say, item number 45 out of 17 million. Well, 45 out of 17 million is pretty darn good, except for the fact that hardly anyone ever gets to 45. So how do we get to the next level? Well, one of the best techniques to do this is to cluster data around keywords. And generally, a lot of times this works where you have one page that's sort of a cornerstone content. So for example, if we're sort of working on the term mountain bikes, that's going to be highly competitive. We're going to need to cluster terms around it. In particular, the search engines are looking to see I don't want to see just one page about a topic. I want to see clusters of content around a topic. The tricky part becomes, now you can do this manually. So say, for example, you write one piece of content and optimize it for this. You write 5 other pieces of content, and then you link them back to this. You can do this manually. But once again, what really happens in reality, people stop doing it. It's too complex to go find, what was I supposed to go link to? What's our cornerstone content? What's the most important piece of content we're trying to prop up? So there's a series of modules that help with this. So Glossify is probably one of the simplest ones. A-Links is one of my favorites. We've been working on this one. I will say it's got a bug right now it's kicking my butt that I got to figure out how to deal with that. But I won't worry about it. But anyway, it's meant to be sort of kind of combining sort of some of the best ideas out of these. To help you basically understand when I write a piece of content, what are other related pieces of content that I want to link to, both on your website and maybe off your website, and it does auto-linking. And a lot of it also has to do with we'll extract information using Alchemy. But so these are the types of things that you want to be setting up and saying, well, I'm going to have these cornerstone content that are going to be, that's the main piece of content that I want to prop up, and I'm going to start writing content around it, and you either need to manually link to those or use some sort of automated tool to help build links to those. So, of course, what ended up happening as we started to build all these tools out, we started to realize, well, this is a whole big collection of these things that were all sort of meant to work individually, and we wanted a way of gluing them all together. So we created a module called the SEO Tools module that really does 2 things. One, it helps you install all this stuff, plus a lot of core important, plus a lot of essential SEO modules like page title. And it doesn't just tell you that you need to install them. It goes in and configures them for you. Or at least tells you need to go over here and get this keyword. But so for example, like when you install page title, okay, you install it, but then you got to go run around and tell it to enable and content type cell to go do all this stuff. So there's a part of this, something called the presets wizard, that works through and sets all that stuff up for you in what are sort of reasonable defaults that you can change. Then it provides a dashboard where it's basically pulling your Google Analytics, but also giving you links to areas and groupings. So for example, if we look at keywords, we're pulling our Google Analytics keyword information so we can see what's happening. But if we want to, we can get into a bigger report. We can go and pull our analytics and do more research. We do more research, or we can go into Google Webmaster Tools and we can see what it's saying are the top keywords on our page. There's also another tool that, so this links to not just things in Drupal, it's also linking to things in Google Analytics and Google Webmaster Tools. So this is kind of an area where you say, well, I want to see how my keywords are doing. Over here is content. Which content am I driving? And you've got things like sources, the page kind of goes down from there. Because one of the other things that we've seen is that a lot of times it's amazing to me how many people don't even have analytics installed on their website. But when they do, they don't look at it on a regular basis. And so the idea is, let's bring the analytics into the site. Because the other thing that happens, a lot of times, it's one person, maybe a marketing manager at a big company that looks at this information. The knowledge workers never look at this stuff. They don't know the impact that the content they're writing is making on the website. And so those are some of the things that we wanted to try to bring in with this tool. Yeah?
Is this on an admin page, or where is it?
This is an admin page, yeah, and it's permissions. Yeah, it's not just open. So it's the administrative backend. I believe it's like through content SEO tools. One of the other things I did want to say, and this mainly came out because there's a really interesting report that came out recently that said by adding the tweet button, you multiply by 4 the average times a page will get retweeted. So one thing you want to look at, this has really nothing to do with the things that we do, but the search engines do look for social indicators. And so, people would say like, well, on Twitter, the way the link goes back to your website, it has this rel no follow, and it doesn't actually count. But the search engines are also trying to figure out, well, how can we get timely information to people? Because they're starting to get their butts kicked a little bit. So I remember, for example, there's this hubbub about that President Obama was going to come on TV several months back, and we were wondering, like, what's this all going to be about? We didn't go to Google to figure out what was going on. We went to Twitter to find out what was going on, because Twitter is going to update a lot faster. And of course, we found out that was when they were coming on to do the speech about when they killed Osama bin Laden. And so what the search engines are trying to do is figure out how can we get faster? How can we use these social indicators to find better content? And so I'd recommend whenever you've got a blog, you've got anything like that, is put these types of things on your website so that people easily can share them. One last thing that's important is the impact of speed. There's a lot of people I see that like to go buy cheap hosting and then want to place well in the search engines. And there's all kinds of challenges with inexpensive hosting. Nowadays, some great work that's been done by Josh Koenig and David over at Four Kitchens, building out the Pantheon system. And so you can go to Amazon or you can go to Rackspace. Of course, you can get into the managed stuff over at Acquia and get some very fast-moving advanced hosting for Drupal that will greatly increase the speed of your site. I remember when we first moved our website to, I think we first moved it to Amazon at first, and then we ended up moving it to Rackspace for better support. I think we went from time to first byte was about 3/4 of a second, and time to render page was about 5 seconds. And we were sitting on a dedicated server. Once we moved into the Pantheon stack, and this is an older version. In fact, actually, yeah, it's Pantheon now. It was Mercury when we first moved to it. Our time to first byte went down to about 0.2 of a second, and our time to render went down to about a little under 2 seconds. We actually saw the bounce rate on our website decrease by 15%. And decrease, or the bounce rate decreased. So in other words, we had 15% less people jumping back from that first page. Yeah. It made, I would say, after about 3 weeks, we saw about a 5% jump in search engine traffic. It wasn't a significant amount of search engine traffic jump. The more significant part was actually the human side. So just wanted to kind of mention that if you're trying to do this stuff on inexpensive hosting, I'd look to, and it's important to your business, or organization, I would look maybe to move to something that's going to be more expensive and performance driven. This stuff was really hard to do 3 years ago, and now it's a lot easier to do because, like I said, some of the great work from the Pantheon people. So basically, this is like a hosting installation instance, and you can get it through, and I'll say this, I never install it. The guys just install it. You can get it at Rackspace. You can get it at, we've done mostly Rackspace and Amazon, and then all the hosting over at Acquia is the same way. And so if we ever have clients that need support and hosting, Acquia is a great way to go. But like even on the inexpensive side, you can get it for as cheap as a small instance over at Rackspace for $40 a month. I would normally go with the managed at $140 a month. And there's other options that are out there. I believe I think Avomatic has got a supported version that runs something like $50 a month. I haven't used the Avomatic. I've just heard other people in our Drupal user group talking about it. And I think there's a few other hosting companies out there that offer something similar. And obviously, as you go up in price, there's tons of companies that offer hosting with this kind of stack on it. And I know obviously Pantheon, is the guys that created it built a company around doing this hosting.
This is not cloud hosting.
It generally would be in cloud. You don't have to do it in a cloud. It's just it's a server instance. So like in the Amazon and Rackspace situation, it is cloud. You can do it on a dedicated server. So it's sort of extra things on top of the LAMP stack. So one thing is it's compiling Drupal. The next thing is so APC is compiling PHP. Memcache is speeding up the database by putting more things into RAM instead of using the disk. And then really probably the biggest piece is Varnish. That if you have a page you don't need to be logged into, it doesn't even hit Apache, it doesn't hit PHP or any of that. It just serves it straight. Although I'll say this is sometimes a nightmare for development, and wouldn't really have much of an effect if you ever got to serve any dynamic content. But most Drupal sites, when people aren't logged in, which of course the search engines aren't, and most people when they first hit your website, they're just going to get the Varnish cached page. So that's the presentation. And for those who are all head off one question that I'm sure I'll get, we are in the middle of porting these to 7. We've ported. So all of this was for 6. We've ported content analysis, content optimizer, and readability to 6. I'm this close on keyword research. I've got just a few more things I got to get done on it. And then Alchemy will be next. We're actually going to be converting SEO tools will be done as an app. So we've got an apps marketplace that we've been propping up. So I got to kind of wait till I understand that technology a little better. So we're hoping to have the full suite back all ported to 7 by December.
Are these slides going to be made available?
I'll put them up. Also, I've given this presentation before, so if you go to SlideShare, my handle, I have never outgrown my college handle of TomDude48. So if you go to SlideShare, you'll find the slides up there also. DUDE48. So questions? Anybody?
Alchemy and Calais.
Uh-huh.
I understand what you're saying about up in Calais being geared more towards a news environment. Would you also get that type of orientation or direction with Alchemy in addition to what Alchemy has to offer?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Is Alchemy more inclusive or comprehensive?
It is. So a lot of times what ends up happening is if you try to extract keywords using Open Calais, you're going to get things that are like famous people, things that are related around news. So let's say, for example, that we're trying to extract keywords around mountain biking. Calais is not going to be There's not a whole lot of news around mountain biking. And a lot of products that people are selling. And so Alchemy is a better sort of general engine where Calais has been tuned much more around new things that you would see in a newspaper or on the news on a regular basis. So and the thing is, if you have a news-oriented website, Calais is awesome. But if your site is around things that you don't see on the front page of New York Times or the usatoday.com or something like that, yeah, then that's where Alchemy ends up being a better extraction system. I would say this that we've also built Alchemy, and I'm talking about like the API service itself and its ability to extract. The modules that Phase 2 built the Open Calais system. The purpose of their modules are somewhat different than the purpose of our modules. So you get different Drupal functionality using both of them, although some of it's similar. I mean, they built theirs so you can do like the more like this and the tagging. We've set up Alchemy to do the same thing where you can auto tag nodes and so forth, but it's kind of somewhat of a different mechanism. So you've got both what the tags are coming out of the system, and then what the modules are doing with it. Did you have a question?
I've been trying to do a little research on SEO stuff, and it seems what I read now is that meta tags are pretty much useless these days.
Yeah. Yeah, they have been for the most part. That's correct. In the old days, it was you stuff a bunch of meta keywords, but the search engines don't really look at it. In fact, it sometimes can hurt you because it can look like a page is over optimized. The keyword, so there's pretty much two main meta tags that people talk about, and that's the description and keyword historically. The description and the keywords. Keywords, I sometimes, you still sometimes do it just like because people come along and go, well, you're not doing it properly if you don't have these two tags, but they really have next to no impact. Yeah. The one thing that can happen is the description. Sometimes the search engines will use the description to be your write-up in your search results page.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Because when the returns come back, people scan and they sort of click on the one that says most relevant to what you're looking for.
Yep.
So let's say instead of using the keywords in the SEO, I don't use the meta that the text.
Well, these modules will work. You can have it in or you don't have to have it in. So they're not. It's not like one replaces the other. These are so meta tags. Like there's a good set of modules. That's what the SEO checklist works with. Is that it works with the site architecture. Like how can we construct our website? This set of modules is more how do we build content to work with that architecture. So the meta tags module is about how do we architect the site to have all the things we need. And so the tools, you can turn them off or you can turn them on and it'll work with them either way.
And how long will it take me to go through this checklist and have everything running okay on my website?
It depends, that's a complex, surprised I've never gotten that question before. And this is where my brain goes in 1,000 directions about the 23 different ways of answering this. I would say this. This may be a good example. When I first gave this presentation about a little bit over a year ago at Open Camp, we actually had one of our clients that we built the website, but we weren't actually doing marketing for them. And one of their people was in the presentation, and he basically took the information and went and implemented it on their website. And he had the whole thing implemented in really about an hour or two. And he's a programmer, doesn't know much about SEO, so he read up some on SEO, followed the instructions. And I wish I had the stats, but they actually made a pretty significant jump. Now, it's a big Fortune 500 company that had tons of links coming in, and they had a lot of potential that they were sitting on top they didn't know about. So that helps a lot. But so I mean, he got the whole thing implemented in about a week. He got all their content tuned up, and it was about 200 pages of content. They got tuned up. I'm sorry, you were next.
Yes, I did not see any way to check for alt tags or images and that sort of thing to get images into the Google image search.
Sure.
And get backlinks from that.
Sure. And the SEO tools, we don't have a facility for that. That is sort of in the issue queue for the content optimizer module, is to look at that, to start looking at stuff like that. I do believe there are some things out there that do that though. And that's going to be in the fields interface, the CCK fields interface. Yeah, and you can select whether you want a title or an alt or something like that. And I think there are a couple of other tools that are out there that'll do things along those lines. Another question? I would say that's in general true. It's going to depend. The thing that's kind of neat about this, and backlinks are the trickiest part. If you've got a website that already has backlinks, you can normally get impact pretty quickly. Now, and that's if like no one's ever gone in and optimized your website. The tricky part though is it's one of those things where with not a whole lot of effort and kind of a little bit of knowledge, you can have a great impact. But again, you might get to, say you've got a keyword term that you're really targeting, you might move from your something like 1 million and you move up to 45, but there's 17 million out of 17 million results. So numerically, that's a great position. But to get up into those next levels could be really tricky. So, I would say there's definitely there's a certain learning curve that's not too bad to just get some good results. And what you'll find is you'll start getting, I love it when if clients do this, all of a sudden like the phone rings or something like that. And normally it's on these 4 or 5 word phrases that, not necessarily say mailboxes, but something that's a little bit longer. But then, there's a whole nother learning curve to getting to that next point. And that is kind of where you might need to bring in experts or have someone in-house that's trained specifically to kind of get to that next. I mean, it's just like anything. I mean, it's just like Drupal. You can go in and site build, in a couple days of training. But really, to do it right, it takes months to kind of get used to it. So, part of this, the thing that I always recommend to people is set up a budget around, and it can be a time budget, it could be a dollar budget. Set up a budget around these things and monitor your results. And I always like to use progressive budgeting. So it's like, all right, well, if we're going to monitor how many leads we get, we're going to say it's worth $50 for a lead we get. So we're going to spend a little bit of time or money, however it's going to work out, getting to that initial result. And then if we get there, let's start reinvesting back into this effort. And so you kind of, and if you do that properly, you'll actually kind of find that perfect balance where, because we've had a lot of clients that they're like, oh, that stuff never works or whatever, and then all of a sudden they start doing really well, but they never spend more than a couple $1,000s a month when there's really a lot more traffic for them to get, and you get the reverse. People spend all kinds of ridiculous amounts of money, normally in PPC, and they really should be, and so kind of using that progressive budgeting technique is a good way to kind of figure out where kind of the optimal effort and spend is. I'm simplifying it, obviously, but it's the general approach. Yes?
I was curious your take on the SEOMoz.org or a third-party reference when trying to develop this skill set.
All that stuff's awesome. One of the things that's really hard, one thing that's nice about being in an agency is that you get to see different techniques and how they work differently on different websites. And it sometimes surprises me how, we tried this one thing on one website, it worked great, we tried another one, it didn't work at all, we don't know why. And one of the things that's awesome about joining the forums and just reading the materials is now you've got hundreds of people that are doing this and you can compare notes. Because the search engines are obviously trying to, they don't want people to understand their algorithms. And so they're trying to hide them as much as possible. But on these forums and just obviously the learning and news that comes out of something like DMOZ. And so what he's referring to is there's websites out there, just like Drupal.org, where you can get better at doing Drupal stuff. There are websites where you can read articles about, say, search engine optimization. Another one I really like is Mashable, which is kind of a combination of tech news, social, and SEO. But SEO Moz is a great one to work with. There's SEO Book, too, which I believe that one's actually built in Drupal. And normally they'll have articles sections, but they'll also have forum sections. So the articles are great, but because you always have to keep up on kind of the latest trends, but the forums are really kind of interesting because you just have these masses of people that are trying to optimize across huge numbers of websites, and you kind of can compare notes. Particularly, there'll sometimes be these significant changes in algorithms, and people are trying to dissect, who got hurt, who did better, those kinds of things. So that's where a lot of those forums are great to kind of collaborate with other people. Strategically, we're probably optimizing for maybe 50. I would say we have top priority of probably about 20 to 30 terms. We have ones that we consider significant are maybe about 200 terms. But the other thing that we do is a lot of it's just, when people blog on our website, most of the time we're not blogging to go after keyword. When people are blogging on just whatever they've learned recently, they find interesting. And so in a sense, we're kind of going, on almost every blog post, basically, we're still optimizing. And so it might be something that, I remember it's kind of weird, some of our popular posts, we have one on CK Finder that's driven a lot of traffic. I don't think it necessarily drives us any business, but it generates some goodwill. And the person who wrote that, wrote CK Finder and just used these tools to kind of do the long tail to figure out some variants. So, in one sense, high importance, I'd say we've got probably about 100 to 200. Of somewhat importance, we've probably got up to about 400. And then each post, it's important to that post. With clients, it depends on the situation. And the situation's very different if they have an old website that's got lots of links. So our big clients, they're in a different, or if they're are in some sort of exciting industry, we have one client's a flight school, and people just naturally link to them, even though they never. And so they're in a bit of a different boat. They can go after a lot of keywords quickly. Clients that have new websites or haven't really spent a lot of time building links. Then we're going to ease them into longer tail 4- and 5-word phrases. And a lot of times we're focused on early wins. So, a lot of times for most sites, it's going to be anywhere from, the high priority will be normally about 20 phrases. And you work on those for, say, 6 months. And then normally, just any flag phrase could be anywhere from 100 to 500, might be typical. And if you're doing paid search, then you're normally looking at 500 to maybe 2,000 With all the different little modifiers and geo-targeting, things like that. And I will say, the guys work with the clients. I pretty much just work on our website. So I'm not 100% sure what's typical. That's the way it was when I used to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. So any other questions? Otherwise, I think it's going to happy hour or something. I did want to mention one other thing. So we have a distribution called Open Enterprise that has all of this stuff integrated into it. It's in Drupal 6. We're going to have the Drupal 7 version of it coming out soon, and this stuff will be converted into apps, so it's a lot easier to install. You have to go download all these modules and everything. So be looking for that. We're hopefully going to launch the core part of Open Enterprise in about a month. It's all going to be free stuff. It's also going to be a great way to just learn Drupal site building. If any of you are trying to learn and get your heads around it, it's a great thing to download and just look at how do we put views together, how do we put content types together, that kind of stuff. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.